our goal and vision is to become the source of truth with regard to quality and performance data across the industry.
The trucking industry is crazy right now, and being a broker can be stressful. Managing your invoices, billing, collecting, carrier base, and cash flow can feel like an impossible task. But I can tell you, OTR Solutions has figured out the impossible. They eliminate cash flow problems for carrier payments and ensure margin funding in just 24 hours with broker invoice factoring. OTR Solutions takes care of billing and collection processes with your shippers. And with lightning quick and accurate invoicing, your customers will never need another broker to handle their freight needs. Kick back, relax, and let OTR take care of your brokerage. If you want to know more, and I hope you do, check them out at otrsolutions.com/freight-caviar to see what they can do for your business. Or give them a call. They love to talk to brokers at 770-882-0124. We've partnered with Ascend TMS, the world's most popular and top-rated transportation management system. It's the ultimate tool for all your freight needs. You can use our referral code RA-FreightCaviar! To receive 3 months of Ascend TMS for free. It only takes 20 seconds to sign up, and no credit card is required. You can click the link below to learn more. John, thanks for joining us in the show today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the logistics world?
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. So John Stauffer, I'm the co-founder and COO of ISO. Got my start in logistics pretty similar to how a lot of people get into the industry, kind of accidentally. I studied marketing in college and actually, oddly enough, wanted to be an architect when I got out of school. So my parents strongly encouraged me to wade into those waters rather than diving into a couple more years of school right after graduating college. I ended up taking a, introductory course to architecture and quickly realized this wasn't really for me. So I was in Chicago at the time, and obviously logistics is a huge industry. There's a lot of great companies in Chicago, and had a family friend that was connected with the founders of Real Time Freight, Chad and Adam Safro. So kind of brokered an introduction there. I'd taken a class my senior year where the focus was around logistics. The professor kind of rubbed off on me a little bit. He was, incredibly passionate about the space, and I learned a ton. So I figured, okay, I'll do this for, a little while I figure out, what the rest of my career looks like. And then, fast forward, I'm still in the space, almost, a little over 15 years later. So, it's been a fun journey. Made a ton of great relationships and obviously learned a lot. So, but not exactly an intentional entry into the space.
Definitely. And what's interesting about you, John, is that you started off in Chicago, which is like the freight broker kind of capital, and then you moved to San Francisco, which we're going to get into here soon. But what's interesting is you got into the freight tech industry in San Francisco. So that's something that we're going to dive into today. And I think that's a definitely unique story. And so you started off at Real Time Freight back in Chicago, a TMS that got bought out by Truckstop. As we know, this is Charlie Safro's husband, Chad Safro, and I think Adam, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So you got there, and then you transitioned to Echo in 2009. How did that come about, and what was it like? Because I know you were the founding member of the carrier sales team at Echo. Is that correct?
No, that's a little generous, right? I was early on the carrier sales team at Echo, but certainly not the founder. So I'd had a handful of friends in the space, and had a good high school buddy that was at Echo and was kind of talking about the growth. This is right before their IPO in 2009 or 10, I believe. And Echo at the time was, primarily, focused on LTL. That's kind of how they got their start. That was their niche. And so they were investing heavily in truckload at this time and building out this team. And So the transition seemed, pretty natural. I was, selling real-time freight, the load board service indirectly into carriers, and they were building out the carrier sales team at Echo. So I ended up making the jump over there. I was probably one of the first, 20 or 30 carrier reps on the truckload team there. So um, it was. It was a smooth transition, and I was really excited to get sink my teeth in a little bit more into the operations of everything rather than selling software and actually getting into the operational piece of it.
Sure. What were like your key
Can you,
takeaways from Echo? And Bob, go ahead as well, real
yeah,
quick.
can you explain a little bit more what exactly like carrier rep and the truckload team is? Like, what's the difference? What other teams did they have on there?
Yeah, no, good question. So Echo was set up in a buy-sell model, or I've heard it referred to as the Chicago model of brokerage from certain folks. So they had AEs, or the sales team that's going out and soliciting freight from shippers, and then they had the truckload carrier sales team, right? And so what our responsibility was to, number one, cover all of the freight that the sales team goes out and wins. And also build and establish relationships with carriers and fleets.
Carriers.
Understand what their operating profiles are, understanding what their needs are, and kind of recognizing those patterns so that you can then take their services and abilities, and then feed that back to your sales team so that they can go solicit that to the market.
So basically, there's basically salespeople. They go out, they find the customer, they bring the customer's load in, and you guys just take care of those loads and cover the loads and get the carriers to take those loads. So I'm guessing that's one way to do it. What's like a different way? Because I'm not from the brokerage side, I'm more from the
Yeah.
carrier side. But for me, a lot of this stuff is just interesting in the way. So what's like a different model? It would be somebody that goes out, I guess, get the customer, gets the load, and then still finds the carrier to book it for him, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think that's probably the other most popular model, right? The kind of cradle to grave model where you do everything, right? And I think the argument for that, and I think TQL is probably the most popular model of that setup. But I think the argument for that is that there's less handoffs, right? You know directly from the customer what the requirements are. You're probably pretty familiar with their operating profile, and then you can communicate that very clearly to the carrier that ends up pulling the load for you. So there's less opportunity for information to slip through the cracks in that model.
Hey there, amazing listeners. If you're enjoying what you're hearing on our podcast, we need your support. It will only take a moment, but it would mean the world to us. Please make sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to share with one of your friends that would enjoy our content. Your engagement helps us reach more people and bring more awesome episodes to you. Thanks a million, and thanks for being part of the podcast community.
Yeah.
But then, like that model, you could kind of only grow a certain amount, right? Because once you get one good shipper or one good customer, you have to keep taking care of him instead of going out and getting more businesses, right? Am I getting?
Yeah. Well, you could build a team around one person. I think that's what TQL does, right? They just like if you like get big enough at TQL, they'll give you more people to your team.
Okay.
But it's like that team is only solely focused on that person's freight. So it's still like somewhat like it, but every person will fulfill like every function, unlike the truckload kind of team or carrier sales team where they're just strictly focused on trucks. And like me being also from Chicago, I also was only trained in that kind of model where I was just on the carrier sales team as well, just like John was back in the day. So John, what were your most valuable takeaways from your experience at Echo? And I know that you ended up moving to San Francisco, I believe, right after your time at Echo. Can you kind of tell us what motivated that decision?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of, kind of the most valuable takeaways from Echo, I mean, that's where I, kind of built the foundation for my career in logistics. That's where I got all my kind of domain knowledge and expertise, learned from some incredible mentors there. But I mean, I would say the most valuable takeaway is probably the relationships. Have a ton of close friends from Echo that I, keep in touch with regularly, and, continue to work with throughout the rest of my career. So, that was probably the most valuable takeaway. Great experience. Going to learn how to cut my teeth in a competitive environment. and that sort of thing. But in terms of the transition out to San Francisco, that was kind of a unique one. There were push and pull factors at play there. So my wife and I ended up moving out to San Francisco in 2015. Um, we had a couple friends that had made the move, similar from Chicago to San Francisco. They had kind of transitioned into the tech world, so that was obviously a draw. At that point, we were like I think 29. We didn't have kids, and we were kind of ready to take a chance or a risk in our careers and make a transition. My wife was in PR in Chicago, and she was really trying to break into in-house marketing. So we had this discussion saying, hey, like, let's do it. Like, what do we have to lose?
Yeah.
And I didn't really take her seriously. I didn't realize that she was actually that motivated to do that until she came home from work a couple of weeks later and said, "Hey, I'm getting flown out to Oakland for a final round interview at Clorox." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I guess she really is serious." So I had a conversation with Echo. At the time, I was managing the Southeast and Southwest carrier groups, and they were super flexible. And we had a small branch office in San Francisco that I ended up going out to kind of be this like embedded truckload consultant and help grow the truckload business, and also work on some more strategic carrier relationships with our national fleets, and move into more of a kind of special projects role and capacity, rather than just like transactional live freight. So and then I would also say weather was a big factor. There were I think 2012 and 2014 were the polar vortex years.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a big push factor. But that was kind of the impetus for the move. And when we got out to San Francisco, like I said, I kind of had the bug to go, move into the tech space and look around, and had this vision of moving into like a SaaS sales role at one of the big companies out here, and ultimately ended getting introduced to the co-founders of an autonomous trucking company called Otto. And that was particularly exciting to me because, being a carrier rep, you deal with a lot of headaches and challenges working with carriers, right?
Yeah.
Sleeping drivers, wrong turns, that sort of thing. And I think we'd spent the past 7 or 8 years on the carrier sales desk, dreaming of robot drivers. So that was a super exciting opportunity that came up for me. So I ended up joining them a little after, probably just under a year of being in San Francisco.
Okay. That was Auto.
Auto.
Okay.
Auto
And
truck.
then Auto trucks. So that was strictly for self-driving trucks, that the company Auto.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I reached out. I had a mutual connection with some folks over there, and I reached out to them, assuming they'd be interested in my background because of the relationships that I had with carriers, and from like a biz dev standpoint. Because Auto's thing was, we're going to retrofit existing trucks with the technology to make them self-driving, right? So I was like, okay, these guys probably, would be interested in a partnerships or go-to-market strategy standpoint. And they were, really interested in my background, but they were more interested in my logistics background. Oddly enough to me, I was like, okay, that's kind of a head scratcher. They were like, how does, a shipper like Pepsi know how to get something from A to B? Like, what is, how does all of that work? And they were, very keen on understanding how the movement of goods and kind of the logistics industry worked, and kind of peeled back layers of the onion, and they had this kind of marketplace vision that ultimately they would plug the self-driving trucks into. So I ended up joining them as a product manager. It was a really exciting opportunity for me because it was a transition from operations into a tech-focused role that I knew would be, kind of translatable to other companies out here in the Bay Area.
Okay. I'm wondering, from Auto, I know Bob's going to probably have some questions on the self-driving trucks.
Yeah.
How did the technology work? I'm just more or less curious on how the tech work, and are they currently still like business, still developing?
So I was focused on a completely different part of the company, so I couldn't really speak to how the technology works. That's
Yeah.
that's a little bit over my head and outside of my domain expertise. But Otto was actually acquired about 4 months after I joined by Uber.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, so it was the self-driving truck company that they acquired, and then that was kind of the genesis of Uber Freight. So I found myself as kind of the first PM or product manager for Uber Freight, building out this marketplace concept, and then kind of joined forces with a handful of folks that were from the Uber rides business that were also researching this freight concept at the time. So we kind of came together, and that was the beginning of Uber Freight.
Oh,
Wow,
interesting.
that's pretty cool. But I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon where there's going to be self-driving trucks. I think it's, I don't know, still really, really far,
I
in
think,
the future.
yeah, I mean, I think that there are certain elements that are, the technology is really applicable for. You look at, some of the folks that were at Otto have their own companies today, and I know they're doing, very specific routes.
Yeah.
The line haul piece, I think that there's definitely an application there. I think the local pick and delivery stuff, navigating complicated, local, cities or environments, that's obviously, incredibly challenging for a 53-foot truck. But I think the highway piece, if you think about the challenges that they have to navigate relative to a city, right, where you have
Yeah.
pedestrians, stoplights, all sorts of variables that come up on a highway, it's really just, staying between two lanes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Uh,
But I mean, yeah, on the highway, I feel like anybody can kind of drive. It's funny because I have like some stories where, even I used to give like some of my friends, they would just say they didn't even have a CDL. They would just drive on the highway because it's super, super simple to drive. But from from what I understand, even though like right now what's kind of happening in trucking, there's less and less of a highway run. So most of the stuff is even going on rail or whatever. And now it's like all these shippers or distribution centers, they're all over big cities. So now you have less and less, stuff that's going really far over the road. So eventually I feel like there's not going to be that much stuff that's ran on the highway. It'll be more like regional stuff or short stuff. So we'll see. I think there's a lot of changes that are coming to the industry, so it'll definitely be interesting to see what's going to happen.
yeah,
For
for
sure.
sure. And like all these small changes happening over over, I guess, the next decade, like we won't be able to see the difference over a year, but over 10 years, it'll be a drastic difference.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm curious, John, if you could a little bit tell us like the differences that you observed from going from like a Chicago freight brokering like landscape to more like the venture capital software part of like, the Bay Area, Silicon Valley. What were like the differences in terms of like the mindset and people's kind of like, I don't know, culture and like work life?
Is it
Yeah,
less stressful?
uh, I wouldn't say less stressful, but definitely different stressful. Um, I think the biggest difference that I saw from my seat, and particularly at Uber, was this attitude that like no problem was too big to solve. Right. The Uber Freight experience was really exciting and energizing because you've got this blend of all of these traditional industry folks, right? We pulled a lot of people from like Echo, Coyote, CH Robinson to build out the industry expertise on the team, and then that was blended with a lot of people that came from Silicon Valley tech companies. Uber Rides was obviously a huge feeder of the folks on that team, and they brought this attitude of kind of challenging the status quo, right? Logistics was, there wasn't a ton of investment in logistics at that point in time, right? This is like 2016, 2017. And obviously it's come, a long way since then. But at this point, there hadn't been that much investment or scrutiny on like, how does this industry work, right? Status quo seemed from my perspective, seemed to be there seemed to be some complacency around just how stuff worked, right? There was an appreciation for the scale and sprawl of the industry, right? Like there's over at this point in time, over 500,000 trucking companies. There's all these different systems. As an operator in the space, you really appreciate the challenges and can understand, wow, it would take a ton to actually, drive some change here, eliminate some waste. You pull in the Silicon Valley perspective where, it's a bunch of disruptors, right? There's no problem too big to solve, and they're all motivated by that. So I think that was the biggest, attitude shift or difference that we saw. And it was particularly exciting for me, right? Like I mentioned earlier, I was, ready to kind of move on from the industry. And that experience at Uber Freight actually kind of re-energized my, passion for the space, right? It was, working with all these people who were so curious about, why does it think this work that way or that work that way? And there was this motivation to solve it. So it was really energizing and invigorating.
Definitely. That's a good point you made.
That's good to hear though, because I feel like, like sometimes a change, like you need a change like that in your life where it's, you get surrounded by people that are motivated, because you get so, I guess like you were kind of saying, like you were in the industry and you kind of get almost burnt out, but then you go and meet people that are just interested about that industry because they don't know much about it. You're like, whoa, this is pretty cool, because they're super into it, and you get motivated by that. So
yeah, absolutely. The fresh perspective goes a long way. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, it's like
but you're saying that the stress level is still there, huh? In the Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I mean, it's I would say you're operating at the same intensity as you are on the brokerage floor, right? It's just you're still incredibly goal oriented, and growth is a huge priority, right? So it was definitely fun, and but also intense at times.
Yeah.
And that landscape, like it ultimately motivated you to start your own venture. But can you kind of tell us like how the idea came about for isometric technologies, and how did the founding like years look like? What was it like?
Yeah. So ISO was born from a lot of pain and experience in the industry. So we're basically we're a scorecarding solution, right? Our goal is to kind of streamline this data reconciliation process that exists between shippers and carriers and brokers and carriers, to get everybody aligned on a central source of truth. So one of the things that we observed, my co-founder and I observed, was that there was a tremendous amount of time and effort that goes into aligning data between a shipper and their transportation partners, whether it's a broker or asset-based carrier, right? Scorecarding, right? There's account managers across every brokerage floor right now, receiving a scorecard from a shipper saying, why do they show me at 82% on time when I show myself at 90% on time? What's with this delta, right? It triggers this avalanche of workflow to go, audit each and every shipment to understand where is this gap in data. So we experienced this firsthand, right? That's kind of where the idea came from. We realized that, we talked to a ton of different shippers who experienced this challenge as well. And we, peeled back the onion a little bit more and realized they go through this painstaking process because they get scorecarded from their customers, Walmart, Target, Costco, just the same way that they scorecard their carriers. The difference between the customer scorecards is that Walmart and Target and Costco, those scorecards come with millions of dollars of penalties attached to them every month, right? Through things like OTIF and other vendor compliance programs. So it behooves the transportation teams to go figure out, exactly what happened, and be as data driven with understanding their performance, right? Because there's a lot of finger pointing that happens within the shipper organizations too. So that was kind of the opportunity that we saw, and we realized capturing this data is incredibly valuable, right? And it kind of unlocks a lot of different opportunities and possibilities to power other systems and processes by getting this kind of source of truth performance data across the industry.
Okay. Very interesting. And I'm curious, what is OTIF? I have no idea what that is.
OTIF is a vendor compliance program
Okay.
popularized by Walmart, I believe in 2016. It stands for on time and in full.
Okay.
And basically, when Walmart sends a supplier an order, right? It's got they're ordering 100 cases of widgets, and it's due on Friday, right? If you deliver on Friday and it's only 90 cases of widgets, that's an OTIF penalty, right? You delivered short.
Oh,
If you
wow.
delivered 100 of those on Saturday, that's also an OTIF penalty because you delivered late. That has been, I would say that the OTIF and vendor compliance programs were, largely a response to Amazon Prime, and the ability to, for all of us to open our phones, hit a button, and receive something in, 48 hours, right? All the other retailers kind of have to respond to that and figure out, how do we make sure that our shelves are stocked? We have the ability to compete with that delivery experience that, consumers are largely accustomed to now, and that's kind of an expectation.
Very interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Like
Did not know
just
that stuff even exists, but it kind of makes sense. They got to do that, so they could
uh
score each broker and each
well,
carrier, I guess.
like so just for example, like let's say ABC Distributions is delivering or has a shipment that has to deliver to Walmart, and the trucking company arrives a day late to deliver. Like that's essentially what an OTIF penalty would be, right? Like Walmart bought it from ABC Distribution for delivery by Friday, delivers on Saturday. Can you tell us like maybe like what a range of a penalty would be? Like how much would Walmart charge ABC Distribution?
Yeah, so Walmart's like standard blanket fee is 3% of the purchase order value,
Okay.
right? So whatever the order value of that particular load was, it would be assessed at 3% of that value, right? So whether it
Okay.
was, $50,000 worth of goods on that truck, or 100,000 or more, right? So you can
Oh, well.
see how those stack up really quick, right?
Yeah.
And you look at
Yeah.
like Target's 5%.
Oh wow.
Dang.
Other folks are kind of like flat fees. So there's a lot of different variables across all the different retailers, but there's a trend to doing it because they need to make sure that they're prioritized, right? Like if you've got one order that has to go out and it's got a 5% penalty versus another order that needs to go out but there's no penalty, which one are you prioritizing, right?
Yeah. That's very interesting because I actually didn't even think about that. So whenever a truck is late to all these big distribution centers or big companies, there's an OTIF charge. So essentially the shipper is essentially losing money on that. Like or getting money deducted from
Yeah, that fine would be assessed to the shipper
wow.
directly.
Okay. That's interesting. I actually didn't know that happened. So that's curious. So Bob, whenever you're late, the broker or not the broker, the broker's customer has to pay. So I
We're
gotta
never late. We're always on time.
it's actually crazy though. Bob once had I think you got charged. You got charged because you didn't track, but you arrived 4 days early. But they didn't
Yeah.
okay, that
They
was
charged $1,000 and the load paid what, $1,200 or something like that. It was
yeah.
a load out trailer.
Yeah. And you delivered it 4 days early. So
Yeah.
yeah. That's interesting though. So I guess like nowadays, with the OTIF charges, have we seen like has there been a change in the amount of OTIF charges, like percent wise, or in the last like couple of years that have made it like I guess more important for brokers to make sure that they're on time, or how have you seen any differences in the last couple of years?
So during the pandemic, there was some leniency given, right? Obviously, there's a supply chain crisis going on, and everybody's doing everything they possibly can just to like, get stuff out the door, get stuff delivered. So there were certain retailers that kind of had a grace period, or they forgave OTIF penalties during 2020, 2021. They're by and large, for the most part, back. And what you see is them evolving a little bit. Like Walmart, they rolled out OTIF in I think 2016. They now have a program called SQEP, which is focused on more around like labeling and making sure that the barcodes are in the right spot, and everything's easy for Walmart to check into their systems. So they're evolving, right? They're constantly kind of changing and making sure that there's they solved one problem, and now they're focused on making sure there's accountability on how it's packaged, or how they're receiving the goods.
Sure. Yeah. Very interesting. So ISO would, for example, tell you how you stack up to like your competitors. Can you kind of tell us like how that looks like, and how do you get like that data? How do you organize it?
Yeah. So focusing on the shipper solution today, we aggregate data across a number of different systems, right? We aggregate shipment data from a TMS, order data from an ERP. If you've got a visibility solution, whether it's Forkites or P44, we can pull that information in to basically create, we call it kind of like a DNA strand with what happens with like an order and a shipment. That helps us score everything. We also, we score it against all the SLA programs, the vendor compliance programs for Target, Kroger, Costco, Walmart, et cetera. And we also understand, what the SLAs or thresholds negotiated at the carrier broker level too. So we publish those scorecards and measure that across the network, and that enables things like benchmarking and helping people understand, relative to other folks in your vertical or space, you're delivering in the top 10% of all CPGs into Walmart or Kroger versus a different category.
Definitely. And Bob, just to give you some insights, when I was a broker, we would get these scorecards from like the largest shippers. So if you want to work with like Target, Kroger, Walmart, they'll send you your score, and you
really?
And the thing is, like, it gets there's been like really like bad emails from the point of view like where like the customer is upset because like you scored like below a certain percentile, and it's like unless you fix this percentile, you won't have access to the good spot loads, you won't have access to a lot of the good freight, and if you don't improve, they're just going to remove you as a broker from the list. So that's why it gets really competitive, and that's why these scorecards are super important for a broker or a trucking company that works with large shippers, just to make sure that they have good on time and good delivery.
That's crazy, because I feel like that's kind of what Uber is trying to do to the carriers. Because right now I'm actually looking, I just pulled up a Uber thing, and it says your carrier is at risk, and then it shows 5% cancellation score, 100% on-time pickups, 100% on-time deliveries, automated updates 40%. That's the tracking part that we're at risk for, and then it shows us how many loads we did and what we did. That's pretty cool. Yeah. So I guess, because I was gonna ask first that when you started saying this, I was like, I wonder why brokers don't send us like scorecards how the carrier is doing, But then I'm like, wait, doesn't Uber do that? So I just pulled up Uber, and it literally shows on my screen your carrier account is at risk. That's pretty funny. But that's because of tracking. Like we're always on time, always at delivery. Our just drivers don't want to track, or they don't want to hop in the app, and just hit the hey, we're at the pickup, or hey, we're at the delivery. Yeah. It's not that hard, but it's hard to implement it, or it's hard for them to do it, I guess.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to implement. We're launching a brokerage solution next month actually, and you'd be shocked how many folks don't have kind of robust analytics or the ability to produce a scorecard like Uber's, right? They have Uber is a unique animal. They've got an incredibly mature data team over there, and can do some really powerful stuff. But that's an investment, right? That a lot of folks don't have the bandwidth or resources to prioritize.
Definitely. I mean, if like you said, like if brokers had the capacity and the money, or not even the money, but if they were forward thinking, they would be sending that to carriers, because it is actually very important, especially in like this kind of market that we're in right now.
So I think C.H. Robinson started doing that too, because lately we've gotten like you could be like in 3 different categories with them. If you're tracking, then you could be like a core carrier, and then there's like a base carrier, and then there's something else on there too that I've noticed recently.
What are you?
So I guess a lot of
What are you?
I don't know. I gotta check, but we're probably at the base. I don't know. Our tracking is just super hard to track, like to get people to track, because there's so many different apps that each broker uses. And see, I think what brokers don't understand is, hey, there's not we don't only work with CH Robbins. We don't only work with Uber. We work with, hundreds of different brokers every single day. So sometimes it's like, do we track with P44? Do we track with Macropoint? Do we track with Trucker Tools? Do we check with, some other ones? And then the drivers don't even, they don't want to deal that. They have like 5 apps or 6 apps running on their phone. It's draining their battery. They're getting pissed off. So they're like, hey, make sure you accept this. Yeah, yeah. And they never do. So I
Yeah.
think that's what's kind of why everybody is like not on top of that. They
For
got to
sure.
Yeah.
figure out a way, or somebody's got to figure out a way how to just tunnel everything into one, like Macropoint, P44, all these like apps, just put it into one, and then just have the driver download one app and it just tracks everything on there.
Yeah. Well,
But
John, you were just saying that back in 2015, there weren't that many investments made in the industry. And, now, 8 years later, there's all these companies that popped up recently because a lot of money came went into tech. And I'm also curious, because I know that ISO is backed by Maersk, MVP Ventures. There's a quite impressive list of investors at ISO. Can you kind of share what the process of raising capital was like, and I guess how you've been deploying that capital?
Yeah. So when we started the company, we were non-technical co-founders and first-time co-founders. So we didn't have a track record of serial success under our belt from an entrepreneurship standpoint. So basically, we were a couple guys with a deck and an idea. And so we had to go out and pitch investors, and raised a small seed round in March of 2020, and that was people trusting our domain expertise and our ability to execute and believing in us. You mentioned Maersk, Maersk and Blackhorn Ventures. They led our Series A round, which we closed last year, and that process is more evaluating what's the health of the business, how much progress have you guys made, and where are you tracking, based on your internal metrics. So the investment process has evolved significantly. Obviously, the market has shifted quite a bit in the last year. So the venture environment is a lot different. But in terms of how we've deployed that capital, it's mostly to our team. Right, we're building a product from scratch, and I think the vast majority of our capital is going towards employee salaries, and a little bit to systems to support the company. But I think that's probably not uncommon for a tech company like us.
Definitely. So March 2020, essentially the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah.
What kind of emotions were you going through when like everything shut down?
We were like, great timing. We had just signed a 1-year lease at a WeWork in San Francisco, and we had every intention of being Bay Area based, with our team. I think that the nice thing about it was we were first time co-founders. We had no expectation of how this would pan out, and we also, like everybody, had no idea how long that would last. Right, like no one knew that we'd still be talking about COVID right now. But I think that was a big benefit. We didn't know any different, right, and kind of adapted just the way everybody else did. So we were able to hire remotely, build the product remotely, deploy our first customers, Fortune 1000 shippers remotely. So we didn't know any better. Now that things are opening up and we're able to like go on site with customers and get in person, and travel's kind of opened up, this is where we're really appreciating how difficult and challenging some of the stuff we did back then was, right? It's been interesting, but in terms of the emotions, like everybody, confused, scared, I feel like if anything, it's made us kind of stronger and a little bit more resilient as a company.
Definitely. Bob, I'm curious, just real quick, Bob, how was your pandemic looking like? Were you working then? Were you a truck driver?
Yeah, I was a dispatcher then for a
You're
different
just
company. So
okay.
I remember in the beginning it was like you would drive out and everything was like vacant, everything was dead, and you're like, what the
Oh,
heck is going on? But we
oh,
still had to like our truck still had to move because we still had to move freight. In the
sure.
beginning, it was really, really slow for the first couple months, but then it just skyrocketed because everybody was sitting at home ordering stuff, and
Yep.
dude,
All the
the
checks
shipments
coming
were going
in.
through the shipments
Yeah.
were going through the roof, and the loads were going through the roof. So we were doing good back then, but
Yeah.
yeah, before that, it was like it was a scary time because nobody knew, like John said, nobody knew what was going to happen. Is this going to last long? Is this going to be
Yeah.
short? People are saying it's the end of the world, almost. So that's
Sure.
I feel like a lot of people even like it's funny that you said that because a lot of people even kind of gave up on whatever they were doing. I've noticed that even at that time. I remember I was buying like real estate here, and everybody was just trying to sell stuff because they didn't know what was gonna happen, And now
Yeah.
it's like 2 or 3 years later, you look back and you're like, whoa, those were some good deals, or those were like that was the time to kind of invest or do something, at that time
Definitely.
because nobody knew what was gonna happen. But
Man,
yeah,
I can't believe it was
for sure.
already almost over. It was over 3 years ago, which is kind of crazy. So, John, you started off March 2020. You get the seed check in the bank account. Like, what was the strategy then? I know that was right then. It was only shippers as customers. How did that whole
Yep.
look like, and how did everything evolve?
Yeah, we kind of leverage a lot of our relationships that we had in the shipper space from past experience to help close some early customers. So we had commitments and kind of contracts in place. So we had to go get building like immediately, right? And
Mhm.
again, we're non-technical co-founders, so we had to go, hire engineers and get the product up off the ground as quickly as possible. So that was our focus from like a tactical standpoint, but from I think from a strategic standpoint, we're all kind of navigating this new weird normal right behind Zoom screens and everything. So we focused heavily on our team and culture, right? Like, we ended up, hiring remotely. We had people, across, probably 10 states at one point. Um,
Well,
and we had I think we kind of came together and developed this kind of connective tissue through whatever norms and rituals that we would employ, and focused everybody around the collective goal of getting this product up off the ground and deploying it with our customers. So it was kind of a good rallying cry. And I think from another strategic standpoint, in terms of where we focused from a customer focus, knowing that we're in the middle of a supply chain crisis and everybody's like, we're underwater, right? We have no time to invest in other strategic opportunities or tech investments. That made us focus kind of specifically on shippers that were really feeling the pain from a delivery standpoint around vendor compliance programs, shippers that are extremely heavy truckload volume, and typically low value goods where transportation makes up an outsized amount of their cost of goods sold. So that was where we focused, from a strategic standpoint on the sales front.
Very interesting. So, what are like some of those like shippers? I mean, not naming names, like commodities that like are, let's say, low value and they make up a big chunk of the transportation cost.
Food and beverage, like bottled water,
Yeah.
so yeah, soft drinks, and anything that weighs out before it cubes out, like that sort of, that those sorts of commodities. Yeah, but just high velocity kind of like household goods,
Okay.
is where we would focus.
Got it.
Toilet paper, paper towels, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, toilet paper was a hot commodity back then during the beginning of
It's
the
very
pandemic.
very popular.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Um, so now 3 years in, you're building out this new product for freight brokers. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit? I know we mentioned a little bit earlier, but just kind of like what's the plans for the freight broker industry and shipper metrics?
Yeah, no. So we're incredibly excited about the brokerage solution that we're bringing to market here, and have a little bit of backstory on this. This was, um, as this is kind of a tangent from our shipper solution. We've been ingrained in a lot of the carrier communities of our existing shippers. We go to carrier conferences, and a lot of leaders from brokers and carriers that use our solution as vendors for our customers approached us and, hey guys, we love this solution. It's made working with this shipper, that shipper much easier, right? It's streamlined the operations. It's aligned us on this kind of common language around KPIs. We have this same viewpoint of the world. We would really benefit from this if all of our shippers adopted this. So we spent the last, about a year kind of working with some of these leaders, understanding, what are the key value drivers or things that you would expect from a brokerage specific solution. And what we're bringing to market here is, basically a tool that helps standardize performance metrics across the brokerage industry, and unlocks things like benchmarking and understanding, where are my strengths as a broker, where are there opportunities to improve, and help me understand the performance of the underlying carriers that I work with too, right? So to the CH Robinson and Ubers who are publishing scorecards, you have to be data driven with who you procure, right? And because customers have this massive risk of a late delivery into a Walmart or a Target, right? It behooves the broker to be, data driven and service oriented with who they work with. So our solution, helps brokers better understand their performance relative to the rest of the network, sell into their strengths, and procure better at the end of the day. And our vision is to kind of standardize specific KPIs, things like tender acceptance, on-time pick, on-time delivery, bounce, tracking percentage. So and kind of aggregate that into this ISO score that can kind of be viewed similarly to like a FICO score for the industry. And we believe that this should expand beyond brokers, carriers, shippers, and facilities should have this kind of key performance indicator that helps potential partners understand what kind of quality of performance should we expect if we go work with this particular entity.
That's interesting. So just I guess to put in more common terms, because of some of it I feel like I don't really understand it, but basically each broker is going to have a score, almost like a FICO score. Who's going to see the score, the shippers or the carriers?
So the carriers, right? The carriers see that internally, right? And they have the ability to go market that or go work on it, right? To improve it through better understanding their underlying performance.
So basically the brokers are going to give that score to the carriers. Am I getting that right? Or the carriers are going to be giving the score to the brokers? How would that work?
So the carrier's performance for that underlying broker will dictate their ISO score, right? The ISO score of a broker is an aggregated performance across all of their shipments, right? So think of it from like a lane level, like Dallas to Houston. What is this broker's ISO score? And that's a composite of all of their Dallas to Houston shipments, right? That's how that would be calculated. And then they would have one score rolled up for the entire organization. And then, similarly, the underlying carriers would have an ISO score for that broker and across the entire network as well.
And that ISO score compares you to others in the network. How does that look like? The being able to see how others are doing.
Yeah. So for the brokerage solution, basically, think of it as it's almost like a Yelp for transportation, right? I wish this existed when I was booking loads back at Echo, but like you could, as an example, you could type in Dallas to Houston and see all the carriers that you've booked historically on that lane. Mm-hmm. You'd see how many loads have they done. You'd see the KPIs that they've, or see how they've performed across all the KPIs that we're tracking. You'd see their internal performance, and then you could see how that compares to the network, right? So that you can see, hey, I've booked Bob's Trucking on Dallas to Houston. They're at a 92% ISO score for me, but relative to the network, they're at 97. So am I booking Bob on the wrong freight? Are these appointments not optimized? Do his drivers not like the delivery location? Like what's the underlying issue here? And it can spur conversations with, carriers to understand, hey, are we not, are we not booking you guys on the right freight? Should we, shuffle appointments around? Like help us understand, because you're clearly delivering at a higher level for the rest of the network than you are for us.
Huh. It's interesting.
Yeah. So, what role does ISO play in differentiating, like in a down market as we are, let's say, right now?
Yeah, I would say like the early brokers that have adopted us view us as a differentiator and a demonstrated commitment to service. Obviously, trucks are kind of growing on trees right now. If you're a shipper, rates aren't. It's not difficult to get whatever rate you want on a given load. So, we talk to our shippers, they've got, 100 brokers and carriers calling them and soliciting them for business every day. They all say, hey, we're the best at everything we can do. We can do any load under the sun. But says who, right?
Yeah.
So brokers view us as, we've got this neutral data set from Switzerland here that says, we are actually, the best at Dallas to Houston, or we're in the top, quarter of Dallas to Houston. We're in the top 5% on this corridor. These are our strengths. Don't take it from me as the salesperson, right? This is, taking a data-driven approach to, kind of gaining new business and growing wallet share with existing customers.
That's very
that's
interesting.
smart. And then you could actually go back and see what do you need to improve on if you're not doing great or you're lacking at something. So
Exactly.
definitely a good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Thanks, Bob.
I like that a lot. I think it's going to help the industry overall, and just like the more carriers, brokers, and shippers that are interacting with this platform, I guess the better service you could kind of like anticipate.
Yeah, and the more people are scored, I guess carriers, brokers, shippers, whatever it is, I think the less amount of I guess fraud that's going to happen, because there's a lot of fraud happening in the industry right now, and I feel like that's because there is no score. You don't know who you're kind of working with sometimes. You don't know. Sometimes we work with certain brokers and we're like, is this a good broker? Same thing with brokers working with certain carriers. They're like, hey, is this carrier going to steal my load or not? They might think to check out. They do their like due diligence, but sometimes they don't really know. So
right.
I think that's going to solve an issue too.
Yeah. So overall, John, since 2020 March was a seed round, then the Series A last year. How has the journey been overall? What are some like significant milestones that have occurred?
Yeah, I mean, we're a little over 3.5 years into this. I think the most significant milestones that we've celebrated in the business is like the initial customer launches, right? That was like monumental and epic. We had a much smaller team back then, and it was incredible to get the boat in the water, right? Launch the product and get the feedback and get real use cases. So that was huge. In building out the team internally, I think we take a lot of pride in our team. We've got a great culture and an awesome group over here. You mentioned the Series A. That's obviously a huge milestone for any company. It's a big point of validation, and that injection of capital helps you accelerate quite a bit. And then I would say this broker launch coming up here is huge. We're incredibly excited about it. The response from the market has been overwhelmingly positive. I think we're hitting it right at the right time, where we're kind of sitting on top of the right nerve at the right time, and we're incredibly excited. But I'd say those are probably the biggest milestones that we've kind of celebrated to this point.
Definitely. Is there like a specific size of brokerage that you're looking to get on, or could like a smaller brokerage that has just a couple customers also like I guess work with ISO?
Yeah, I mean, so basically anybody with a TMS and that has data to contribute to the consortium is qualified. So we don't discriminate based on size or anything along those lines. we're focused on, top 100 brokers now, but, talking to, but won't, choose to not have conversations with anyone smaller than that. Basically, our focus is on growing the network, right? It's a benchmarking solution, so the scale of the network is critical, which is why we're focused on, kind of the big, more established brokers to get started.
Definitely makes sense. No. And lastly, John, where do you see ISO in the next 5 years? What kind of impact do you hope to have on the supply chain industry?
Yeah, no, great question. Our goal and vision is to become the source of truth with regard to quality and performance data across the industry. We believe that, ISO scores will become ubiquitous, right? Every carrier, every facility, every shipper, every broker should have an ISO score, and that should inform, how people evaluate working with those folks, right? We think that ISO scores can be plugged into a lot of critical, logistics systems and processes, right? Factoring in service is really, how organizations can optimize things like pricing algorithms and, waterfall tendering processes. We also feel that it can, power a ton of automation, right? Paul, you and I were both carrier reps in a past life. The price is huge. Is the carrier compliant? You can go through this checklist of factors that need to be true for you to book a truck. The service quality doesn't really exist today, right? There's no, that's kind of gut and feel and tribal knowledge, or you've worked with them historically. We think that, and that's previously a human being making that call, right? We think that ISO scores can really fill that void and help drive a ton of automation on the procurement side of the house. And we believe that this isn't this is a global problem. So in 5 years, ideally, we're well beyond North America. Our early shipper customers are all kind of global scale, and they've mentioned that they have the same challenges as in Europe, Latin America, and in Asia. So we're excited about the expansion opportunities.
That's really cool. I mean, I'm excited for you as well, Bryce. So
yeah, I'm excited too. This is definitely going to be cool, to watch and see how it's going to be and how the future is going to be, and if everybody has like a score, that's going to be cool.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. Yeah, Bob, I'll have to look up your MC in a couple of weeks and see how you guys are doing.
I could be the first one. Score me first.
Bob and I will one day be telling everyone that we talked to you, John, on the podcast first. Before he goes global. That's really cool, though. Just in case anyone wants to do like a demo, see the technology, get a demo like set up, what should they do, John?
Yeah, come to our website. It's www.iso.io, and you can request a demo there. And somebody should reach out pretty quickly here. And then alternatively, you can reach out at hello@iso.io to request a demo.
Awesome. John, thanks so much for coming on the show. I had a pleasure talking to you. I hope to see you soon. Are you going to be going to any conferences soon?
My next I'm going to North American Supply Chain in Phoenix in September, which and potentially the E2 Open user conference, McLeod user conference, and then CSCMP, which I don't know if that's September or October. CSCMP. But those are the four. Yeah.
Got it. Will you be at Manifest in February?
Yeah, we'll be at Manifest in
awesome.
Vegas. Yeah,
cool. We'll be there.
We'll see you there.
Yeah,
awesome.
I'll try to get Bob out there too. Bob, you got to go to Vegas beginning of February.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
I shall try, but running a trucking business, I don't know about that. I need to move somewhere and do something else, I feel like. But yeah.
Move to San Francisco. Sort of SaaS.
Yeah. Start a tech company too,
Yeah, come out. Yeah. Come work on self-driving trucks.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. It was great talking to you guys. We'll stay in touch. And then John, it was nice meeting you.
Yep.
Yeah, great meeting you guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Daily Freight Caviar podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, or if you didn't, Leave a review. Let me know what you think. I appreciate any feedback. If you'd like to have more Freight Caviar content, go to freightcaviar.com and subscribe to my email newsletter.